Wake up.
And you know who made it irrelevant? You did. You have changed the television landscape over the past 20 years. You took it from being objective and dull to being subjective and entertaining.
With the possibility of a serious infantile paralysis epidemic, health authorities of the city of San Antonio, Texas, attacked the germ carriers throughout the city. With the war-discovered DDT in special sprayers, sections of the city are blanketed with the insecticide in the fight to stop the spread of the dread poliomyelitis. Every suspected spot is sprayed. Even the streams are disinfected, and in the parks and public places, children are forbidden to gather. Tons of DDT are used in this fight against the dread disease, whose principal target is the young. Again, war has contributed one of its discoveries to save life.
These sprays, dusts, and aerosols are now applied almost universally to farms, gardens, forests, and homes. Non-selective chemicals that have the power to kill every insect, the good and the bad, to still the song of birds and the leaping of fish in the streams. All this, though the intended target may be only a few weeds or insects. We have to remember that children born today are exposed to these chemicals from birth, perhaps even before birth. Now, what is going to happen to them in adult life as a result of that exposure? We simply don't know.
Dr. Paige Nicholson, water pollution expert, Public Health Service.
Do you know how long the pesticides persist in the water once they get into it?
Not entirely.
Do you know the extent to which our groundwater may be contaminated right now by pesticides?
We don't know that either, nor do we know if concentration may be occurring in groundwater.
There appears to be growing concern among scientists as to the possibility of dangerous long-range side effects from the widespread use of DDT and other pesticides. Have you considered asking the Department of Agriculture or the Public Health Service to take a closer look at this?
Yes, and I know that they already are. I think particularly, of course, since Ms. Carson's book, but they are.
Now, to these people, apparently the balance of nature was something that was repealed as soon as man came on the scene. Well, you might just as well assume that you could repeal the law of gravity. The balance of nature is built of a series of interrelationships between living things and between living things and their environment. You can't just step in with some brute force and change one thing without changing a good many others. Now, this doesn't mean, of course, that we must never interfere, that we must not attempt to tilt that balance of nature in our favor. But unless we do bring these chemicals under better control, we are certainly headed for disaster.
Rachel Carson, author of the landmark book Silent Spring, started a revolution. During the 1950s, when crop dusting planes and insect sprays blanketed plants with DDT, Carson warned of the dangers of chemical pesticides. She warned of science's power to alter nature and called for government action to protect its citizens. Because of her courage, the disaster did not come to pass, and with Carson's words and spirit, the modern environmental movement was born.
You know, if you were to follow a busy doctor as he makes his daily round of calls, you'd find yourself having a mighty busy time keeping up with him. Time out for many men of medicine usually means just long enough to enjoy a cigarette. And because they know what a pleasure it is to smoke a mild, good-tasting cigarette, they're particular about the brand they choose. In a repeated national survey, doctors in all branches of medicine, doctors in all parts of the country were asked, "What cigarette do you smoke, doctor?" Once again, the brand named most was Camel. Yes, according to this repeated nationwide survey, more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. Why not change to Camels for the next 30 days and see what a difference it makes in your smoking enjoyment? See how Camels agree with your throat. See how mild and good tasting a cigarette can be.
Its forms, powder and liquid, Pestroy means doomsday to us insects. For this new insect destroyer contains a lot of DDT, not just a little. Its DDT content is even higher than government specification. But the really sure kill feature of this insect killer isn't simply that it contains DDT, it's the way that it makes sure that bugs get the DDT that's in it. The same deadly effectiveness of the liquid form is found in the Pestroy powder. It is so easy to apply because of a new efficient dispenser package. All people have to do is to press the patented top like this. It's a handful of concentrated death. This powder is truly activated. It contains stabilized pyrethrum, an ingredient which literally stampedes insects from their hiding places to bring them into contact with DDT, indoors or outdoors. Stirs them up, drives them out of cracks and crevices.
Pesticides weren't always thought to be harmful. To the contrary. In 1947, Time magazine carried an advertisement claiming DDT was good for people, homes, and farms. It took 20 years before scientists realized how dangerous it was.
It begins with the war-born development of DDT. This diabolical weapon of modern science saved millions of humans, but killed billions of insects. Man, with this newly discovered force, has at long last gained the upper hand in our age-old struggle. Just like these mosquito larvae, it came from laboratories where top scientists from famous universities and from industrial and government organizations collaborated to develop something new and different. They succeeded. They perfected Pestroy, the most effective weapon man has ever wielded against insects. To begin with, this new pest killer is a DDT preparation. We realize what that means. Once a bug comes in contact with DDT, he's lost. All he has to do is just walk on any Pestroy-treated surface. DDT is absorbed through the feet and spreads throughout the insect's entire nervous system. The effect is disastrous. DDT seems to literally drive bugs crazy. But not for long. DDT next paralyzes, then kills.
From 1945 to 1955, annual pesticide use on farms went from 125 million pounds to over 600 million. Soon, government agencies began treating even the suburbs with DDT.
People thought it was a good thing because they got action in solving a problem as they conceived it. They were, for example, complaining about mosquitoes. And if the spray truck came down the street, they were told to just stay indoors for a few minutes and everything would be all right. So you had the government endorsing a product and you had the chemical industry pushing it very aggressively.
There was a development program going on within the corporate system saying, well, if a little bit is good, but a lot more is much better, isn't it?
Public health departments staged demonstrations to convince the public of DDT's effectiveness and safety. Enthusiasm for the chemical knew no bounds, and few were questioning the wisdom of such use. Public places and private backyards were being treated whether people liked it or not. In 1957, planes sprayed a Massachusetts bird sanctuary owned by Olga Huckins, a friend of Carson's. In fury and desperation, Huckins told her what had happened. The birds showed all the symptoms typical of DDT poisoning. Huckins knew that the planes would be back in spite of her protests. She asked Carson for help. Carson later remembered how the thought of a spring silent of birdsong had moved her to action.
It was your personal letter to me that started it all. In it, you told what had happened and begged me to find someone in Washington who could help. It was in the course of finding that someone that I realized I must write the book.
Your mouth feels clean, your throat refreshed. The finest leaf tobacco, mild, refreshing menthol, and the world's most thoroughly tested filter. That's Snow Fresh Filter Cool. Why don't you switch from hot to the Snow Fresh coolness of cool?
The farm. It's the lifeblood of countless families across Region 8. For generations, a successful yield was mostly dependent on Mother Nature.
The Arkansas farmers say the wet spring has cost them the best opportunity for planting.
Region 8 farmers are also watching the skies with dread.
What kind of impact did that harsh spring weather have on this year's crop?
But in recent years, the ability to turn a profit has become even more difficult for some due to an herbicide that kills broadleaf weeds known as dicamba.
A man in Mississippi County was arrested after reportedly shooting and killing another man.
The men reportedly had been fighting over a herbicide.
Governor Asa Hutchinson approved new rules to restrict the use of dicamba.
While the weed killer has been on the market for decades,
according to some of the articles you read, about 50 years.
Dicamba-tolerant or resistant seeds are changing the game, and many will argue not in a good way. Here's where the problem lies. Dicamba was never meant to be sprayed on top of crops. It's marketed as a pre-emergent to be used before planting to kill weed seeds. But the EPA gave Monsanto the go-ahead to sell dicamba-resistant cotton and soybean seeds last year. And when those plants are growing, they can be sprayed with dicamba and not be affected. Now, though the seeds were approved, neither the EPA nor the University of Arkansas Extension Office approved a less volatile form of dicamba to be sprayed on those crops at the same time. With these new seeds on the market, some farmers couldn't resist the urge to spray the older, cheaper version of the herbicide illegally. And the University of Arkansas Extension Office says when conditions are right, that dicamba can drift through the air to neighboring fields and harm crops that aren't dicamba resistant.
Weeds just make me rattlesnake mad. Now Roundup has a new sharpshooting wand. I'm sending them weeds to the great beyond. Roundup. No need to pump, just point and shoot. Hit them in the leaves and it kills to the root. Ground fences, trees, even mulched beds. Because the only good weed is a weed that's dead.
Produce, you can use a QR scan on your smartphone.
Oh,
things
for
like
God's
that.
sake, who's going to do that? Can we just put it on the label like everybody else in the world?
What I'm saying is that the market has, when consumers want that information, it's provided to them. Why? I don't care about
it's
genetically
not
modified
provided. No, that's the point.
Which have never been shown to hurt anybody.
But you have a public role here, which is to warn people. It's not a question just
what are you
consumers
warning them of?
Of whatever it is involved in what's in the food. If it's genetically modified,
yeah, I'd like to know that.
I'd like to know
modified.
Listen,
wait a second. Wait a second. Here are the facts.
Whether it is and what it is, they should inform.
In Europe, only 5% of the food is genetically modified. Here, it's 70%. And
what is the definition of genetically modified?
Well, here's something that didn't used to exist. They didn't used to take a gene out of a bacterium and put it in corn so that the corn grows its own insecticide.
Right.
That's right.
Now we do that.
Which, by the way, is good because then we use less insecticide.
Awesome. It's also delicious.
No, wait.
Hold on. No. There's a great argument for it. But if I want to make a decision about whether or not to ingest that genetically modified organism, I don't want it to be kept secret from me. If the argument against it from the industry, the argument against it from the industry is that I will hysterically, as a consumer, make a decision if I see that label not to buy that corn. Well, the solution to that is not then to make it a secret thing that I'm ingesting it, but rather to convince me that it's safe.
And just to show that we are not partisan, the villain in this is Obama to me, because he first of all, he promised blatantly that he would look into this and do something, and he didn't. He also appointed, what is the guy's name? Michael Taylor, used to be a VP at Monsanto, the seat of evil, to be the food czar, the FDA deputy commissioner of foods. And of course, Monsanto's latest Frankenfood got speedy approval because this guy is in charge of it. Because it's like putting Jerry Sandusky in charge of Chuck E. Cheese. Of course he's going to approve with speediness.
Should anything, if there is not a health risk, and there are not health risks
But there may be a health
wait. There may
baby. There are not known health risks that are associated with GMOs. Why shouldn't the labeling be voluntary? And then if you choose,
voluntary?
Oh yeah, I know, voluntary in America. You've got to be nuts.
Right, let's trust the corporations to put people's health above profit, because that's what they would do.
That's not what I'm saying.
That's what corporations normally do.